I do not show these things to the preppers around me. Not because I am selfish, but because I know very well what happens when trouble hits. When bad news first appears, people usually do the same thing. They drive to the same stores, buy from the same lists, and panic at the same time. I have seen that scene repeat too many times. During COVID, during power outages, during snowstorms when shelves emptied faster than usual. Rice disappeared first, beans followed, dried foods were fought over at higher and higher prices. Not because they were the best choices, but because everyone thought the same way. I do not. I do not line up for rice. I do not fight for beans. I do not chase the items everyone is hunting for. I look for different things, things that are not on the common lists, things that are still sitting quietly on the shelves, while others are starting to lose control. Not because I am smarter, but because following the crowd has never been a good survival strategy. These are 10 foods I quietly keep, not because they are rare, but because when people panic, they do not think of them. 1. Bouillon cubes. When a crisis hits, the crowd's reaction is almost identical. People rush toward what are considered main foods: rice, beans, meat, pasta. They load their carts with items that show calories clearly, because in panic, everyone believes that being full is enough. That is exactly why items not seen as essential are completely overlooked. I saw this very clearly during the COVID period. White rice disappeared within hours. Canned beans left shelves empty. Meat was either completely gone in some places or limited per customer in others. But in the seasoning aisle, almost nothing changed. Bouillon cubes stayed quietly on the shelf. No one competing for them. No one paying attention. Not because they were useless, but because at that moment, people had no mental space left for seasoning. I do not keep bouillon because it is rare or hard to buy. I keep it because most people only realize its value after several days of eating the same meals over and over. After 3 to 5 days of rotating only rice and beans, what exhausts people is not hunger, but the feeling that meals have lost meaning. Eating is no longer a normal daily activity, but a forced action just to sustain life. A small bouillon cube can change that in a very quiet way. When dropped into a pot of rice or a pot of water, it creates a familiar aroma, adds just enough salt, and makes the meal feel like a real meal again. It does not only add flavor, it also provides salt and minerals, helping the body avoid crashing during stressful days. More importantly, it keeps the mind from sliding downhill too fast. There was one viewer comment that stayed with me for a long time. They said that during the hardest period, lunch for the whole family was sometimes just a cup of hot broth. No meat, no vegetables, nothing elaborate. But that cup made them feel like they were still eating, not just enduring the day. Bouillon is cheap, light, easy to store, and each cube can make 2 cups of broth. But to me, it is not just food. It is a tool for staying calm, because when meals still feel familiar, people think more clearly while everyone around them is panicking. During the power outages you have experienced, what exhausted you more, hunger or cold? 2. Canned coconut milk. In a crisis, what the body needs before protein is not vitamins but fat. Not to eat well, but to stay warm, maintain energy, and keep the mind from slipping into a dull fog. Rice has no fat. Beans have very little. Most dried foods people stockpile have nearly all the fat removed to extend shelf life. You can eat until you are full, yet still feel cold, tired, and irritable. A can of full-fat coconut milk addresses that weakness exactly. It does not require refrigeration. It keeps for a long time, and most importantly, it restores energy in a way the body can feel immediately. Add it to rice, porridge, or soup, and the meal changes instantly. You eat more slowly, you stay full longer, and the feeling of merely enduring disappears. During the Texas winter power outage in 2021, many families were not short on rice or beans. Some even had frozen meat. But after 2 to 3 days without heat and without electricity, what broke them down fastest was not hunger, but cold and exhaustion. Many people later said they ate very little, not because food was unavailable, but because their bodies no longer had the energy to process dry, bland meals lacking fat. Families who still had oil, fat, or coconut milk endured better, even though their portions were no larger than anyone else's. Coconut milk is not a heroic survival food. It is something that brings meals back to life. It has aroma. It has richness. It offers comfort. In the cold, that matters more than people realize. You do not just need calories. You need the feeling that you are still living as a human being, not just eating to survive. And that is why I keep coconut milk hidden, not because it is rare, but because when trouble hits, people only rush for what they believe are main foods: rice, beans, meat. Meanwhile, the things that keep the body and the mind from collapsing remain untouched on the shelf. When people panic, they do not think about fat. But fat is exactly what keeps you from breaking down before hunger ever arrives. If you had to eat the same meal for 5 days, would you fear lacking flavor or lacking energy more? 3. Potato flour. This is not mashed potatoes, not instant potatoes, but real potato flour. Something that was once considered a wartime food in Northern Europe. In Finland and Sweden, there was a period when children were taught how to make potato flour in school, not for cooking as a hobby, but to prepare for years of crop failure, food shortages, and prolonged disruption. When systems are no longer reliable, the ability to thicken food becomes a survival skill. One comment under the video made me pause for a long time. Someone from Sweden wrote that potato flour holds meatballs together. But it also does something else. They once poured an entire bag of potato flour onto the knee of a cow that was bleeding heavily. It coagulated faster than a compression bandage. It sounds extreme, but it reveals the true nature of potato flour: the ability to absorb moisture and coagulate extremely fast. In a crisis, that matters more than people realize. When food is thin, you feel hungry faster. When soup, porridge, or broth is thickened, your brain receives the signal that you have eaten enough much sooner. You are not just fuller, you feel like you are eating more. With just water and a bit of salt, potato flour can be turned into flatbread in minutes. No yeast, no oven, no complex cooking skills. When fuel is limited, short cooking time becomes an advantage. More importantly, potato flour stores for a very long time if kept sealed, and it does not go rancid like regular wheat flour. It is also gluten-free, something many people only realize the importance of when healthcare access is no longer easy. Potato flour is not popular. It is not mentioned in standard prepper lists. It has no flashy image or survival marketing. And that is exactly its advantage. When people rush for rice, wheat flour, and expensive dried foods, potato flour stays quietly on the shelf, not because it lacks value, but because few people understand its true role. I do not keep potato flour because it tastes good. I keep it because in a crisis, the ability to turn a pot of water into a meal that feels enough is what helps you avoid collapsing before food actually runs out. Have you ever had to throw away food because of a power outage? 4. Ghee One viewer once left a comment that I remember very clearly. After a few days without power, the butter in my neighbor's fridge melted, started to smell, and had to be thrown away. My ghee just sat quietly on the shelf. This is where many people do not believe it, but I will say it plainly. Ghee is not the same as butter. We are used to thinking of fats as fragile. Butter needs cold. Oil fears heat. Animal fat goes rancid easily. When the power goes out and refrigerators shut down, everything starts racing against time. By the third day, many families have to throw away butter because of sour smells and slimy layers. Not because they are hungry, but because nothing is safe enough to cook a proper meal anymore. Ghee is different. The water and milk proteins have already been removed, so there is almost nothing left for bacteria or mold to grow on. You can keep it on a shelf, in the kitchen, in hot weather, and it remains stable. No refrigerator, no electricity, no urgent rotation. Just a small spoon of ghee added to a pot of rice, a pan of vegetables, or a bowl of porridge is enough. Not to eat rich, but to bring the meal back to feeling like a real meal. Aroma, roundness of flavor, and enough energy to keep the mind from going dull in the cold, during lack of sleep, and under prolonged stress. In a crisis, fat matters more than protein in the short term. It keeps the body warm, it keeps energy stable, it keeps the brain clear enough to avoid bad decisions. Rice has no fat. Beans have very little. Dried foods are usually stripped of fat from the start. Ghee fills that exact gap, without relying on any system still functioning. It is not by accident that ghee has been used for thousands of years in some of the hottest places on Earth. In those regions, there was no refrigeration. Only what was truly stable survived across generations. Ghee is not a modern food. It is the result of survival experience, preserved because it once kept people alive. I do not hide ghee because it is rare. I hide it because in moments of panic, most people only think about meat and protein. Very few think about what keeps daily life from collapsing on a sensory level. And ghee does exactly that. 5. Quality instant noodles from Asian markets. I will say this plainly, and it may make some people uncomfortable. Eating healthy is not always the top priority in a crisis. When stress drags on, what breaks people down is not a lack of protein, vitamins, or planning. It is the loss of familiarity. You can survive on rice and beans, but after a few days, the brain grows tired of eating food with no memory attached to it, no flavors tied to normal life. Every meal becomes an obligation, no longer an anchor. And when everything else is unstable, that is what causes morale to slide fast. Quality instant noodles from Asian markets are not the kind you eat just to get by. They are noodles made for daily life, eaten regularly by real people. Fast to cook, low water use, no skill required, and most importantly, many different flavors. In a crisis, speed is an advantage. Low water use is an advantage. But the strongest value of instant noodles is not there. It is in the feeling. I have eaten this before, when things were still normal. A bowl of hot noodles does not solve big problems, but it can stop an evening from turning worse because of exhaustion, irritability, and heavy silence. When the brain is exposed to a change in aroma and flavor, it escapes the stress loop faster than any encouragement ever could. During COVID, I saw rice disappear from shelves within hours. Canned beans were wiped out. Meat was limited per customer. But Asian markets were still full of noodles, full of spices, full of things the crowd did not think about when panic hit. Not because they were less valuable, but because when people panic, they only buy what they were taught is right. Instant noodles are not on serious survival food lists, and because of that, they remain. I do not hide instant noodles because they are nutritious. I hide them because during long, stressful days, a familiar meal can keep morale from collapsing before food actually runs out. And in real-world survival, that matters far more than most people are willing to admit. When you are at your most tired and hungry, what food do you reach for? Not to be full, but to feel okay. 6. Powdered milk repackaged properly. Milk is one of the first things to disappear during a crisis. Not because it is rare, but because it is tied to habit more tightly than almost any other food. When bad news appears, people do not ask whether there is still rice. The first question is usually, what will we drink tomorrow? That reflex is what clears fresh milk from shelves very quickly, even while other foods are still available. What few people realize is this: milk is not just a drink. For many people, especially older adults, it is a marker of daily rhythm. A morning that starts with a warm glass of milk, a bowl of porridge with a familiar taste, a simple batch of baked goods without needing fresh eggs. When milk disappears, what is lost is not only nutrition, but the feeling that a normal day is beginning. In many prolonged crises, I have seen people decline quickly, not because of hunger. They decline because all familiar routines disappear at the same time. No breakfast as before, no warm milk smell, no sense that today is different from yesterday. When every day starts to feel identical, morale wears down fast, especially for those who no longer have much energy to constantly adapt. Powdered milk fills that exact gap. Not because it tastes great, but because it preserves rhythm. A reconstituted glass of milk is not perfect, but it is enough for the brain to recognize this is still morning. For older people, that matters far more than calories. When daily rhythm is preserved, both body and mind withstand prolonged stress much better. But the key with powdered milk is not how much you buy, it is how you store it. Left in its original paper box, powdered milk easily absorbs moisture, absorbs odors, and degrades before its expiration date. Repackaged properly, in airtight jars or specialized bags, it becomes something you can rely on for years without thinking about it. I do not hide powdered milk because it is rare. I hide it because when things begin to unravel, it is one of the few foods that helps you continue living by familiar rhythms, instead of merely surviving each day. And in long-term crises, maintaining a sense of normal daily rhythm is what keeps people from breaking down before food actually runs out. Which item in your home helps you feel that a day is still normal? 7. Dried seaweed. Seaweed does not look like a survival food. It does not make you full right away. It is not fatty. It does not create a sense of reassurance just by looking at it. And because of that, it is never something people rush to fight over when trouble hits. During crises, when rice, beans, and meat are wiped out, seaweed often remains untouched on a corner shelf, especially in Asian markets that few people pay attention to. The danger is this: very few people understand what seaweed is actually used for in those moments. In many prolonged situations, people do not collapse from hunger first. They are still eating regularly, still having meals. But the body begins to decline in a way that is hard to name. Hands tremble slightly during familiar tasks. The mind slows down. The body feels cold even without a lack of clothing. Fatigue sets in without a clear reason. This is not a calorie deficiency. This is a lack of minerals and micronutrients, something rice, beans, or noodles cannot replace. Dried seaweed fills that exact gap. It carries iodine, magnesium, and trace elements the body needs for the nervous system and metabolism to function properly. It does not require much. It does not require elaborate cooking. Just a small amount torn into soup, rice, or sprinkled over a dish while cooking. It does not suddenly make the meal delicious, but it brings the body back into rhythm. You do not feel stronger right away, but you decline less. And that is the difference very few videos talk about. The most dangerous situation is not when you are hungry, but when you are still eating enough yet no longer clear-headed enough to respond. In that state, you do not crash in one day. You slide slowly and usually realize it too late. Seaweed does not trigger panic. It is not seen as important. That is why it stays on shelves longer than most other foods. Not because it lacks value, but because it does not tap into the crowd's immediate fear. I do not keep seaweed because it saves me from crisis. I keep it because it helps me not lose the capacity to deal with that crisis. In long-term survival, what defeats you is not running out of food, but quietly losing strength without understanding why. And there is one more thing, also not considered a main food, also not something anyone rushes to buy, but it plays a role very similar to seaweed in extending the rhythm of everyday life. I will talk about it in the next part. 8. Textured vegetable protein, TVP. During a prolonged winter power outage, someone I know had to do something no prepper ever wants to do: throw away almost all the meat in his freezer. Not because he had failed to prepare. On the contrary, his freezer was full. The problem was unstable power. Sometimes it was on, sometimes it was off. The meat thawed and refroze. The smell began to change very slightly, not obvious, but enough to make you lose trust. By the fourth day, he realized something deeply uncomfortable. The most expensive item in his stockpile had become the riskiest one. No one talks about this when discussing preparedness. But in a crisis, the cold chain is a gamble. When electricity is unstable, a freezer is no longer insurance, but an unanswered question: is this still safe to eat? At the same time, in another kitchen, there was something else sitting quietly on the shelf. No refrigeration needed, no smell, no attention from anyone. That was TVP. TVP is not a food that gives people emotional reassurance. It has no familiar shape, no inviting aroma, no family memories attached to it. And because of that, very few people buy it during panic. But that is exactly what makes it valuable when things begin to fall apart. TVP exists to solve one very specific problem: protein that does not depend on electricity. When fresh meat becomes risky, when frozen food is no longer reliable, TVP remains unchanged. Light, dry, stable. With just hot water, it expands, absorbs broth, absorbs seasoning, and creates enough structure for the body to recognize that this is a protein-containing meal, not just carbohydrates filling the stomach. The important point is not how closely TVP resembles meat. It is the feeling. You still have options. You are not forced to eat rice and beans endlessly just because there is no other choice. You do not have to trade safety to get protein. TVP does not try to replace meat. It was never meant to compete with meat. It exists to reduce absolute dependence on meat. And that difference matters greatly in a prolonged crisis. When the system is stable, TVP is a secondary option. When the system breaks down, it becomes a quiet anchor. And that is why I keep TVP. Not because it is perfect, but because while everyone else is betting everything on freezers and the cold chain, I want something that does not require a bet. Something that sits quietly on the shelf, waiting for the moment when familiar choices are no longer safe to use. 9. Whole wheat berries. Flour is one of the things that looks safest in a kitchen pantry. But in reality, the opposite is true. Once flour is milled, it begins to degrade the moment it is exposed to air. Natural fats oxidize, the smell changes, and nutritional value slowly declines, even though it still looks fine on the outside. In a prolonged crisis, flour is something that spoils before you realize you are losing it. Whole wheat berries are different. When the grain is intact, it is almost frozen in time. It does not degrade quickly. It does not need refrigeration. If kept dry and sealed, it can last for decades while still remaining usable. You do not need constant rotation. There is no pressure to use it quickly out of fear that it will go bad. I remember a story shared after a major winter storm in the central United States. One family had stocked up heavily on flour, believing it was a smart choice. After nearly 2 years of not using it, when a prolonged power outage hit and they began cooking more, the flour had a strange smell. Bread would not rise, and the food came out dry and unpleasant. They still had flour, but in reality, it was no longer usable. Meanwhile, their neighbor kept only a few buckets of whole wheat berries and an old hand grinder. Whenever needed, they ground just enough for one meal. No excess, no spoilage, no worry about tomorrow. The most important point is not that you will eat bread every day. Most likely, you will not. But wheat berries give you something flour never can: choice. When you need it, you grind. When you do not, you leave it alone. You are not racing against time. Time is on your side. In a crisis, people do not panic because food is immediately gone. They panic because the feeling of choice narrows day by day. Today, it is still there. Next week, less. Then comes the moment when you no longer know what to rely on. Wheat berries do not solve immediate hunger, but they keep the door of options from slamming shut. You do not need complex machines. A hand grinder is enough. You do not need elaborate bread. Rough flour, water, and heat are enough to create something edible. What matters is not how good the food tastes, but that you still have the ability to make it when the system no longer supports you. I keep wheat berries not because they are convenient. Quite the opposite, they are inconvenient. But that inconvenience creates the biggest difference between having food and having control. And in a long crisis, that is what allows you to endure calmly. 10. Chia seeds always soaked. I will say this clearly once, because this is something very easy to use incorrectly. Chia seeds are not a snack, and they should never be put straight into your mouth when you are thirsty. Historically, chia seeds were used as a travel food. The Aztecs carried them not because they tasted good, but because a very small amount could take them very far. But they never ate them dry. They always soaked them. When soaked properly, chia seeds do something very specific. They retain water in the body. When water becomes more precious than food, this matters far more than most people realize. Just one small spoon of soaked chia seeds mixed into rice, porridge, or a drink will make you feel full longer, eat more slowly, and avoid sudden energy crashes. In a prolonged crisis, this is not a small thing. It allows you to stretch portions without feeling like you are being deprived. But used incorrectly, it is different. Eating dry chia seeds, unsoaked, especially when water is limited, can cause digestive trouble. Not everyone tolerates it well. And that is why I do not consider it a superfood. Chia seeds do not save you. They do not replace a meal. They are only a small tool, useful at the right time and in the right way. And because they do not feel ready to eat, do not provide instant fullness, very few people rush to buy them in a panic. They stay quietly on the shelf. even when familiar foods have already disappeared. I keep chia seeds not because they are powerful, but because in survival, what preserves a steady rhythm of life matters more than what makes you full quickly. These 10 items do not turn you into a survivalist. They do only one very simple thing. They keep daily life from collapsing too quickly when the system starts to wobble. Preparation is not about buying more than other people. It is about being surprised less than other people. When others panic because shelves are empty, you simply open your cabinet and continue living as usual. And in instability, normal is the greatest advantage of all.